So, as I said at the beginning of the year, I wanted to have conversations with interesting people about politics and not just do pre recorded content. I've been making good on that, talking to Democratic congresspeople and hopefully a Democratic senator in the near future. And I'm also about to talk to one of my favorite commentators on YouTube, a man by the name of Steve Shives, who has a YouTube channel called Steve Shives, 190,000 subscribers at the time of recording. He does pop culture analysis, particularly about Star Trek, and political commentary. Great video essays that I want to dive into. Without further ado, here's Steve. How's it going, Steve?
It's going very well. I'll just offer my condolences for you apparently coming down so rapidly in the world from talking to Congress people and senators. And now I'm talking to Steve from YouTube.
No, I see. This is actually, I think it might be a step up. Hopefully none of these Democrats are actually watching this, but you and I'll actually be getting into more controversial things, I expect, than these Democrats.
Well, I appreciate being here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So, I reached out to you last week. I've been following your content for, honestly, it may be about a year at this point. You were brought to my attention. I'm not sure you're familiar with he's a liberal streamer on YouTube. His name is Destiny. Are you familiar with Destiny at all?
I've heard the name. I can't say that I'm too familiar with the actual content, but yes, I'm familiar with the name.
Fair enough. So he has a very active community on Reddit, and I'm associated with him and a guy named Luke Beasley, who's another content creator people should definitely check out. And on Destiny's Reddit, there was a video essay, and it was part of your "If the Republicans Said the Quiet Part Out Loud" series. And so I watched it. It was highly acclaimed in Destiny's Reddit, and they're very particular about what they hear from the left. They're very critical of the left very often, but they loved your content. And that was kind of my entryway into the Steve Shives content rabbit hole, or Steve Shives universe. So with that in mind, like I told you before we started recording, I want to go into how you got into the space. Then I want to talk about your politics for the biggest chunk. And then I'd like to close with, your takes on pop culture, got you into pop culture analysis, because I'm also a bit of a pop culture fiend as well. But if we could start with how you got into content creation, if you want to give an overview of what you do and how you got there, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, in very general terms, it's not that different than a lot of other people on YouTube do. I mean, I make what I suppose could broadly be categorized as video essays, or video commentaries, or little skits, as I sometimes call them, depending on, what the actual thing is. And my entry point into making YouTube videos was the atheist community. I still consider myself an atheist. I don't really participate in whatever is left of the online atheist community at this point. But what first sort of motivated me to start making videos was this, and this was 13 or 14 years ago, when there was a lot of atheist related content on YouTube, and a lot of like atheists making videos to argue with Christians or argue with creationists, and there was a lot of back and forth debate. And I just, had my own opinions on things and my own takes on things. And I think I had been writing a blog at that point for a while. And I thought, well, why not make videos and kind of translate that, from prose into video. And
before you go on, just for context, kind of tease this out. Is this like the Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens age of atheism?
Yeah. The new atheism. Yes. The new atheism. Yeah. And it's a tale of disillusionment. It's like a progressive disillusionment. Oh, I like that guy. Oh, wait, never mind. Oh, I like that guy. No, never mind. There's a lot of that. If you are an atheist, and you are also politically conscious, and you are also of a progressive mindset, and you support things like social justice, the atheist community back then was a very disillusioning place to be, because it started out as like, oh, it's all about open-mindedness and caring about the truth and wanting to build a better society for everyone. No, whoa, no, well, wait a minute, not so much for Muslims, and not so much, well, women, but only up to a point. And like the sort of pre-existing biases and bigotries and so forth of people kind of started to creep in, and it just wound up being something that just didn't last. Um, but that was where I first got sort of interested in making videos. And then once I started making videos about that, I thought, well, I have opinions about lots of stuff. Why don't I make videos about other stuff? And my YouTube career from that point has been sort of on a trajectory of just finding different areas that I have an interest in and have at least the ability to have a somewhat informed opinion about, and have something interesting or something that I think is interesting to say, and then just finding hopefully engaging and entertaining or useful ways to say it.
So a couple of things touch on there. You said that actually at the time you were blogging. So do you consider yourself, are you more comfortable writing, or are you more comfortable in front of the camera, or is it a mix, or are they inextricably linked? How do you like characterize your relationship between writing and your video work?
I guess I still think of myself primarily as a writer, but at this point, they're pretty much inseparable. I mean, almost all of the writing I do at this point is writing for the camera. I'm writing something that I know I'm going to be putting on camera in some form. So they're pretty inextricably linked. I like the way Andy Rooney, the now deceased longtime commentator for 60 Minutes, described it. He said, "I'm a writer who reads what he's written." I don't think it's quite the same with me, because there are some of my videos that are clearly a little bit more performative than just me reading what I wrote. But a lot of them are that. A lot of them are, I wrote a little op-ed and I put it in the teleprompter, and now I'm going to read it with inflection, to the camera, and that's pretty much the video. But yeah, if I absolutely had to choose one category, I would still probably like to think of myself more as a writer than anything else.
Do you get time with, because you, seems to me, based like, because again, I follow your channel pretty heavily. Like, you put out a lot of content. I put out 4 videos a day, which is a lot of content, but mine are unscripted. I have to do all the editing and the research, but I actually have an Elgato, one of those new Elgato prompters, which, by the way, I'd recommend to you if you don't have, because it actually lets you use that prompter as a monitor. So that's actually how I'm looking at you right now, and also looking into the camera. And it's actually, nice. Yeah, it's helped my workflow quite a bit. So I don't have to look down.
Yeah.
But I don't have to, I've not written this stuff. I would love to use it for its teleprompter purposes, but I tried it a couple of times. It's hard, man. It is hard. I don't know how you do it, like matching. You got to get the rhythm down. You don't want your eyes to move too many times. And finally, I said, to hell with it. So I respect what you do. And you put out a lot of content doing that. It's not like one video every 3 weeks or anything like that. So do you, with that workload, do you actually get any time to just write exclusively? Do you still have a blog? Is there a Steve Shives blog spot or blog space or anywhere out there?
No. Pretty much all of my writing goes straight toward the YouTube channel, because yeah, it is very time consuming. It's a full-time job. And the most time consuming part of it is the writing. I do occasionally do videos that are off the cuff. If I feel like I have something to say that won't take very long, and I can remember, 2 or 3 main points that I want to get to and not wander off too much. I still will occasionally just, I do videos where I just put my camera on my monopod and just kind of hold it out in front of me, in my living room or someplace, and just, go deliver an off the cuff little commentary about whatever. I still do those from time to time, but almost all of my stuff is scripted. And just because I feel like it's the best way to articulate what I'm, if it's a commentary, it's the best way to articulate the points I want to make. And of course, if I'm writing like a sketch where I'm playing characters, obviously I'm not going to improvise that. I'm going to write that ahead of time. And yeah, for the first probably 7 or 8 years I was doing it, I didn't have a teleprompter, and I would just memorize chunks of the script. Not like huge chunks. Like, I've never, I envy.
You don't have an eidetic memory, Steve?
No, God, no. I I envy stage actors who are
Mhm.
able to commit like an entire play to memory and just perform it time and time again. Like that to me is a superpower. I would write videos with my sort of memory capacity in mind, and I would structure the video so that, okay, I can do a cutaway to a graphic here, or I can cut to a different shot here. So I only have to memorize this much at a time. And, shooting enough video to do what would end up being maybe like a 10-minute finished video would take 2 or 3 hours, because it's a struggle to, first I have to remember it, and then I have to not only remember it, but say it the way it needs to be said, and, et cetera, et cetera. And the teleprompter has hugely streamlined that process. So to the point that the actual being in front of the camera and shooting the video is probably the part that takes the least amount of time. The writing takes the longest, and then the post-production, editing, and so forth takes, depending on the video and how complicated it is, takes a chunk. But yeah, it is time consuming. But it beats having an actual job. It beats
Agreed.
working for a living.
Agreed. Yeah. So I finally went full time in late February, and it's
Mhm.
been so, full disclosure for my channel, I do electoral politics and political commentary from a left and liberal perspective. I'm unapologetically partisan. I don't pretend to be a centrist. And by the way, this is we'll get into it when we talk about the politics. So one of the things that
Yeah.
attracted me so much to your content was just how unapologetically ideological you are, in the sense that you don't pretend that the left and the right are equally good or equally bad, the Democrats and Republicans have equally good ideas. And again, we'll get into that. But just being inundated in this space and doing this all myself has been very challenging. Doing 4 videos a day and all the stuff and the research and the recording and the post-production. But I will say, I do not miss my conventional,
Yeah.
9 to 5.
No.
So it's equal parts stress and reward. So, when you were describing the timeline, I guess I had it in my head that you did pop culture first and transitioned into politics, but from the sounds of it, you began this from a more political lens if you were motivated by the opinions of the new atheist movement and things like that. So what got so you started in politics, then started to, dip your toes into pop culture analysis and things like that?
Yeah, well, the pop culture stuff and the sort of broader, like, media focused videos came pretty quickly. I mean, I started doing content about, sort of atheism and religion related topics. And I started to like the process of making videos and, being on camera and performing and delivering my little monologues. And I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed writing for it. And, like I said, I have opinions about lots of stuff. So, I fairly early on in the YouTube channel, I would post movie reviews. I would post, I remember, I think my first sort of lengthy video essay about a pop culture thing was, I did this at the time. It was a 2-part video, because this was so long ago. This was when YouTube had a time limit on its videos. You could only make a 15-minute video. So I did a 2-part video that was a defense of the movie Superman Returns, which is a movie I still love.
With
But
Brandon Ruth?
with Brandon Ruth and,
Yeah.
unfortunately, Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor. But that's one of those things where you just have to, I'm just going to push past this, and also Bryan Singer directed it. So it's problematic, doubly
right.
so. And it's
I'll just say, as a bit of a dovetail, again, and we'll get into this when we talk about pop culture, it is one of the challenging things to when you learn that some of the most talented actors, because I loved Kevin Spacey's work. I love James Woods' work. And to find out, and so it's like it's very challenging to separate like the work from, the other aspects of the person. I do my best, but so I recognize the struggle there.
Yeah, but that was the first time that I did a video like that. And then gradually I just sort of did more and more like that. And what happened about maybe 6 or 7 years ago, maybe even longer now, I did a video about a Star Trek related topic that got a lot of views. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe this is something. And I started to do that as a regular thing instead of an occasional thing, but still also do the political stuff. So it kind of, my YouTube output in its present form kind of started to take shape at that point, where I was like, okay, I'm going to regularly do pop culture related stuff because I do like that. And I do feel like I have something to contribute there, but I don't want to not do political or social commentary either, because I think that's really important too.
Yeah, and I'm hyped to talk about the pop culture stuff because my channel is exclusively about politics. So when I began, I dabbled in streaming during the pandemic because some acquaintances said, listen, if you've got the free time, if you work from home, we recommend that you get into content creation. And I was I'm 33 years old, but I have a real boomer energy about me because I had no idea that this world existed. I didn't know that the Young Turks or the Majority Report or Hassan or Destiny and all these other content creators, David Pakman, I had no idea this existed. To the extent that I was familiar with YouTube political commentary, I mean, obviously I'd heard of Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And there unfortunately was a phase in my life where I was a contrarian, lapsed lefty, where I despised the Republicans and I only ever voted Democrats, but I would only consume contrarian debate stuff. And like, man, I wish we had our own Ben Shapiro. We will get to that in a minute as well. But when I started this, I tried to do like the catchphrase for my channel was pondering politics and pop culture because I love pop culture. But I was then advised, listen, it's too wide of a field. You got to pick one. And unfortunately, as much as I love pop culture, I felt more of a pull towards politics. I have a political science degree. I've always been a C-SPAN junkie. So my channel, Pondering Politics, is exclusively about politics. You seem to have cracked a code, my friend, where you're able to put out a freaking Star Trek video and it be badass. Then you'll follow it up with a polemic video about Republicans that has nothing to do with Star Trek. And then it performs well. And then you'll do something like, what the hell happened? You're defying conventional wisdom here. Or am I missing something and one set of videos do better than the other?
It varies. I mean, I do think if I did choose one and give the channel a more consistent identity, I do feel like the videos might do better because it would be more of an easily identifiable, like, oh, Steve, he does this. Mm-hmm. I would fit more neatly into, oh, he's a Star Trek YouTuber, or, oh, he's a political YouTuber, or whatever. Like, and because I'm kind of a bunch of different things, I feel like some people maybe who are first being introduced to me, they'll see they'll see the video you reference, one of the if Republicans said the quiet part's loud, and they'll be like, oh, okay, he does this kind of thing. And they'll go to my channel and they'll see some of that, but they'll also see a bunch of Star Trek stuff. And they'll be like, I don't know. But I just can't bring myself to do that. Like, I can't bring myself to say I'm only going to make videos about stuff in this particular realm. Like, there's something about having an eclectic channel. It might hold me back from being as popular or as successful as I could be. But it enables me to continually have motivation to do it. I never get burned out. I never feel like, oh God, I wish I was doing something else. Like, I always feel like, even though, I mean, it is a job, it is work, and there are definitely times where it is not fun, but I never feel like, oh God, I don't want to do this. I never feel like, oh, I need to find something else to do with my life. And I think part of that is that I'm constantly working on things in different, I'm not talking about Trump all the time. And I'm not talking about Star Trek all the time. I'm moving from thing to thing, and it keeps it fresh and keeps it interesting.
Yeah. I admire that because, I mean, if it's a full-time, if you're doing this full-time, it is successful at the very least enough to pay the bills, and you seem to enjoy it. I think that's something that's worthwhile. Again, I'll tell you, being inundated in politics 24/7, it's made me, I'm kind of like by default a cynic by nature. I know a lot of content creators say, oh, I'm an optimist. I am not. I am a glasses half empty kind of guy when it comes to politics, and I generally assume the worst. That predisposition has not been helped by being inundated in one thing. And I wish I had 6 more hours in the day because I'd love to talk about, I'm more of a warzy than a Trekkie. And again, we'll get into that too. Sure. But I'd love to be able to do more of what you do. So I really respect the fact that you're committed to this and you found a way to have a dedicated community to make it work for you. So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you. I'm kind of happy about it myself.
So with respect to politics, okay, again, this
Yeah.
was the big thing that pulled me in. So again, I found that these two bigger content creators, Destiny and Luke Beasley, kind of helped shepherd me into this space that I'm in. One's a live streamer, the other one's a content creator who does pre-recorded videos as well, kind of like in my format. And on Destiny's Reddit, the live streamers Reddit, they posted this video of if Republicans said the quiet parts out loud. And I watched it and I was sucked in because yes, it was a performative skit. You had your blonde wig and you had your rolled up sleeves and I love the green screen and everything. And it was so damn good, Steve. And so then I started watching one after the other. The thing that about your content that really resonates to me, and I say this with affection, because this is something that I have a bit of myself, is when it comes to critiquing the other side, you are a prick, and I love it. I love the fact that you don't feel the need to whitewash what this opposition party has become. So can you talk about that approach? Because the perception is that people on our side of the aisle is that we're timid and we're meek. And honestly, I do see quite a bit of that on our side, that Republicans have a license, Steve, to say whatever they want, whenever they want, about whomever they want. They have the likes of Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles and Steven Crowder, these brazen, prickly personalities, these smug personalities. And we're supposed to behave, like timid, wallflowers and stuff like that. And you seem to have said, no, I'm going to tell it like it is. Can you talk about that?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is just my own personality. I mean, all those people you just described, the Ben Shapiros and the Michael Knowles, et cetera. I mean, if you look at what they put out into the world, it's bigotry, it's intolerance, it's alarmism, it's a lot of false information. And if you are the kind of person who either puts that out into the world or seeks that out and like actively consumes that and reflects those kinds of values in your everyday life, why should I be nice to you? I mean, there are lots of people on our side who have taken it upon themselves to try and reach across the aisle and try to convert people and try to, find common ground. And if that's where they feel their talents lie and that's where they think they can make the most positive contribution, I think that's great. I wish them luck. I don't necessarily think they have all that great of a chance to succeed, but I hope they do. I wish them luck. But that's not where my talent lies. That's not where my interest lies. I'm not really, and I realized this, I think pretty early on when I first started doing like electoral political videos, like partisan political videos, not just talking about philosophy and atheism and stuff, but like talking about, people running for office and pertinent modern day current political issues. I realized, I'm not really trying to persuade anybody, or at least I'm not trying to persuade anybody who is arrayed against me, right? Like if I make a video about trans rights and you are absolutely committed to the position that, trans people are not their gender and trans people don't really exist and they don't deserve equal rights and they don't deserve respect. Okay, well then I'm not talking to you. And I don't care if I change your mind or not. Maybe I will. Maybe you'll watch something I say and something I say will click a switch in your brain and you'll think, oh, actually he has a point. Maybe that'll happen, but that's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is reach people who already agree with me, but maybe aren't as engaged or aren't as active, and maybe they'll donate to a cause or they'll vote in an election for someone that they wouldn't have voted for before or something. But I feel like it's more valuable for me to speak to people who are already mostly in agreement with me and maybe just need a little push or just want to be entertained and just want to, have a good laugh at the other side or have someone say something that they have thought but couldn't put into words. Because I know like I've appreciated that when I've seen that in other people. I see a video by somebody and they'll say something and I'll think, oh, I wish I had said that. That's so good. That's such a great point, or that's such a great way to phrase it, or that's such an interesting outlook to take on it. And I think, oh, that's great. Now I have that. I wish I had made that up. It's so good. Um, and I hopefully I can be that for somebody else. But yeah, the idea of being diplomatic with people who are just grossly, unapologetically bigoted and intolerant and authoritarian, I just don't see the point of that. And I can't bring myself to do that. I'm like, I'm not going to shake hands with people who I know, if they had their way, would turn this into an even more of a nightmare than it already is, intentionally, like not even by accident, like intentionally. I can't see my way to being nice to those people.
Listen, I love it. That's where I thought it was just a breath of fresh air because, again, it seems one of the things I complain about on my channel is what I call the asymmetry of expectation that is imposed by the right and by the center on the left. Where, again, I keep going back to, I see this all the time. How often have you seen people on what I call the Fox Propaganda Network complain about liberal elitism and leftist elitism and how condescending and arrogant and rude the left is and how they demonize half this country? Meanwhile, you literally have sitting members of Congress, not random people on Twitter, not even YouTube content creators like you and me, but people who wield state power, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, consistently referring to the Democratic Party as a party of pedophiles and groomers. And Fox, pardon my French, they don't say shit about it, right? Because it's okay. It's permissible. Those are real Americans, Fox says. Fox says that, people in rural areas have a total claim on, this country, that millionaires and billionaires aligned with the right, that they, despite their wealth and their privilege, they are, I guess, by osmosis or by affiliation, part of real America. It's people on the left, people in urban areas, people in blue cities, blue states, marginalized groups, minorities, whatever. Those aren't real Americans. And so it's perfectly acceptable for the right to say whatever they want about the left, and the left can't respond in kind. And that asymmetry, I think, is one of the many reasons why the left's political mission is so damn difficult. It helps exacerbate these institutional advantages that the right has, because not only do we have an uphill battle, but we have to hike, with one hand tied behind our back. We can only, and I refuse to accept it. And I think this is a hill worth dying on. Is that how you look at it? That because I don't know what your commenters like say. Do you ever get feedback from people who say, Steve, you're not diplomatic enough to the right, you should reach out? Do you ever hear that from people?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Occasionally I'll get, even just gentler comments from people saying like, oh, you're just preaching to the choir, which I understand. And which is, generally speaking, I suppose that's what I'm doing. But yeah, I get comments like that. And I occasionally even get comments from people who are on the right who will say, you make videos like this and, people like me won't want to watch your videos. And I'm like, good. Like, I get one of my favorite sort of subgenres of comments I typically get is on my pop culture videos. On if I do a video about Star Trek or something, like especially Star Trek, because Star Trek by its nature is very progressive and very socially conscious, I will go out of my way to inject politics into those videos. If there is even the slightest opportunity to talk about the political message of a Star Trek episode, I will do it, and I'll do it in a way that would be, hopefully funny and entertaining to someone who shares that view and alienating to someone who doesn't. And I do that because I don't want you to watch my videos, and I don't want you to feel welcome in this space. Like, if you leave a comment and you're civil, I'm not going to automatically ban you just because you say I'm a conservative. But if you say you're a conservative and you show up just purely to start an argument or to whine and complain, well, you're not going to have a very good time, So I do get those comments, and I make an effort as much as possible, because I know I do a lot of videos, and I know not everybody watches every video. Most people don't watch every single video I make. So if they see a video of mine and it's their first time, or just one of a handful of times they've watched something of mine, and they see me say something really abrasive toward conservatives, I just want to make it clear, like, no, I'm doing this with full knowledge of what I'm doing. I'm not trying to make friends with people on the right. I view them as my enemy and as the enemy of the kind of country that I would like to live in. And I'm not trying to be nice to them, and I'm not going to make any particular effort to be nice to them. So thanks for stopping by, but you kind of wasted your breath with this comment, you know?
So do you agree then, as far as like that asymmetry, that and maybe you've never said it quite so explicitly in your videos, because clearly you reject it, right? Obviously you don't comport with this asymmetry. Do you think it's worth breaking? Like if you had the opportunity, like if you know, an elected representative were watching your content, is that a message that you'd want them to take away? That listen, you're not obligated to treat MAGA Republicans, particularly the leaders of the MAGA Republican movement, which I hold is the most morally culpable for what the right has become, that you're not obligated to be kinder to them than they are to other people. Like, I guess what I'm saying is, would you hope that your videos inspire Democrats to show more of that sort of grit and abrasive behavior rather than, you know, the kind of feckless, you know, twiddling of thumbs, oh, my friend on the other side, that sort of thing? Would you like to see them move away from that?
I would love that. I mean, I think I have said that in videos. I mean, because look, I am a registered Democrat. I vote Democrat. I consider myself a Democrat. My least favorite part about the Democratic Party is how milquetoast the establishment Democrats are. And yeah, I mean, every time, you know, it's progress that Joe Biden even says MAGA Republicans. You know, like the fact that he is now willing to call them out and identify them as a threat, like that's progress. And even now he still does the my friends on the other side thing. Like he's still, and not just him, but he's sort of the embodiment of it, of this mindset of just like, oh, we're all colleagues. Well, if you think of it like that, we're going to lose because they don't think of it like that. Like, you think Mitch McConnell has warm, fuzzy feelings about his colleagues on the left? No. I mean, it's recognize an enemy for who they are. And yeah, I would say not only should they treat their opposition in harsher terms, but I think they have an obligation to. I mean, you know, and I'm not saying that we should go back to having people get caned on the floor of the Senate, but like, yeah, they're not your friends. And if we should have learned this during the Obama administration, and too many of us didn't, and some of us apparently still haven't learned it after the Trump administration. Like they're not coming to the table in good faith. You know, you might come to the table with, oh, okay, well, we can compromise on this, and this will probably be a area of agreement, and they're not coming with that attitude. They're coming with the attitude of we're going to do anything we can get away with to get what we want. And you need to be ready for that. And I'm not even saying like the Democrats should be just as ruthless and just as willing to like go outside the Constitution and do illegal criminal stuff. I'm just saying recognize them for who they are, and don't allow yourself to believe that, oh, well, if we can just find the right points of agreement, then we can get some things done. Like, no, they're your enemy. They want to destroy you. They want to take this whole thing over so they don't have to deal with you anymore. Do you get that? It seems like a lot of Democrats still don't get that.
No, I completely agree. And you said so much there I want to unpack. So it's funny. You reference how President Biden, and I can't remember if it was 2022 or 2023, but he did that speech outside of Independence Hall with kind of the same lighting that I had, except that the red here was much more, much more stark. And what was interesting about that, I don't know if you remember this, but so that was the first time he really harshly called out MAGA Republicans. What was hilarious, Steve, is the president went out of his way to repeatedly emphasize, I would argue he was too generous, where he was like, not all Republicans, not even a majority of Republicans are MAGA Republicans. I've been able to work with Republicans in good faith. They're my friends and they're colleagues. And he went on and on, basically reading off a list of disclaimers.
Yeah.
And it earned him no goodwill from the right. when the Fox Propaganda Network, when the Daily Wire and others, you hear this from Ben Shapiro, Brett Baier, Jesse Waters, Tucker Carlson. The president demonized half the country. How would you? And it's like, well, no, he went specifically out of his way to not do that. And so the lesson, and they continue to do that even when Biden tries to couch his rhetoric that way. And so to your point, it's like, what has that attempt at good faith gotten him from the opposition? Because they don't say, the president had harsh words for a subset of Republicans or Republican leaders. Instead, they try to spin it. President Biden hates every conservative, every Republican, when that is demonstrably not true. He gives them much more charity, I would argue, than that political party deserves. So I know you said it's a step in the right direction. I agree. The fact that he's willing to call them out at all. Let's talk about the president specifically. Do you ever think that Biden will get to a point where he stops couching his language, or do you think he's always, because he's an 80-year-old institutionalist and that he'll always try in vain to reach across the aisle every time he criticizes them?
I mean, he has moved a lot further in the right direction than I thought he would. And he has shown in the past he is someone who can be moved, like he can be pushed. He digs in his heels a bit too much for my taste on a lot of issues, but he has shown that he can be moved and he can evolve. So, I mean, there's always hope, but at the same time, that would be so contrary to who he has always been. I mean, the way you just described him, I mean, he is an institutionalist. He is someone who has, or at least seems to have, this very deep-seated romantic attachment to bipartisan politics, to the idea that, we all come to Capitol Hill and we all come from different backgrounds with different beliefs, but we all believe in the same fundamental principles and we can all work together and accomplish things. And that's just not the way it is. I don't know if that's ever the way it was, but it's undeniable that that's not the way it is right now. And so, I mean, as much as I would love to see him get there, hopefully, preferably between now and November 5th, although that's I feel like that's hoping for way too much. But even, assuming, fingers crossed, he gets reelected, at least at some point in his second term, it would be nice to have a Democratic president who was unapologetically a Democrat. Not even like a far radical leftist, just an unapologetic left-leaning liberal Democrat who was like, you know what, we're not going to raise, we're going to raise taxes on the rich. We're going to support labor unions. We're going to support equality for marginalized groups. We're going to protect the environment. And as long as we have the votes to do that, we're going to do it. And if you have a problem with it, but you don't have the votes to stop us, well, tough shit. Like that's what I would love. I don't know if Biden's ever going to get there, but yes, I would love to see that happen.
Yeah, it's funny too, because I hear this all the time, and I understand where the first lady was coming from when she said this, the former first lady, Michelle Obama, the iconic, when they go low, we go high. And I'm not sure, I'll take her and get good faith and assume she didn't mean the way I think it's been interpreted by a lot of feckless Democrats. I think actually her husband's a great example of someone who was thwarted very often by that, prescription, because to your point, that was a lesson. So in my estimation, the modern Republican Party, as we know it, this obstructionist authoritarian party, really began, in my opinion, during the speakership of Newt Gingrich during President Clinton's administration. Then Mitch McConnell in the Senate took that formula and ran with it further. And that's what and then MAGA, of course, has just taken it off the cliff, right? But it started with Gingrich, accelerated under McConnell. And now it's at the point where I think even McConnell has recognized he's almost like Victor Frankenstein, right? Where he has created this monster where even he is like, this is not,
I don't know.
I don't know about this. But of course, he's also he is the embodiment of exactly what you were talking about, which is, let's say that he is a quote unquote principled conservative. Well, MAGA is not a principled conservative movement. It is an authoritarian movement that sheds its principles they'll say one thing on Monday, completely contradict themselves on Wednesday, and on Friday they'll have never noticed the contradiction. If McConnell were a statesman, he would do everything in his power to oppose MAGA. But instead, even though he clearly has misgivings about MAGA and about Trump, it's clearly not what he prefers. He puts his party so far above country. He's like, screw it. I'd rather have a devolved, diseased Republican Party supreme than a Democrat victorious. Yeah. And to me, like you said, it doesn't require Democrats to take it nearly that far, but just to show more grit rhetorically and also with tactics, as you say, when you have the margins, brute force it. If you need to make exceptions to the filibuster, so be it. The thing that I hear a lot, Stephen, you tell me what you think about this. They say, well, Josiah, if Democrats start playing more ruthlessly, that just means that Republicans are going to take the gloves off. I don't find that very satisfying, but I was wondering what you make of that. Well, Democrats can't act because Republicans may do worse.
My first reaction is, well, can we at least try it and just see what happens? I mean, it feels like it's been so long since Democrats even attempted to stand up to Republicans with that kind of force. Like, can we just try it? And the other thing is, why are we worried about what the Republicans are going to do? I mean, there's a famous quote from General Grant from the Civil War, where he got tired of hearing his subordinates talk about General Lee. And he is supposed to have said to them, I'm tired of hearing about General Lee. Don't worry about what he's going to do. Worry about what you're going to do to him. And I think that's the attitude that the Democrats should have. Like, anything they do, the Republicans are going to react to and strike back against. And like you said about Biden going out of his way to qualify his condemnation of MAGA Republicans as much as possible. And when the talking heads on the right reacted to it, they acted like he had just, that he had just given some kind of speech where he announced he was arresting all Republicans and sending them off to a gulag. Like, it doesn't matter what the Democrats do or say. The Republicans are always going to react strongly, and they're always going to try to paint them as just the worst people in the world who are trying to destroy the way of life of all real Americans. So don't worry about what they're going to do. You know what they're going to do. They're going to throw a tantrum. They're going to try to stop you. But if you are fortunate enough to have large enough majorities in the legislature and have control of the White House and have the political power where you don't need to worry about what they'll do, don't worry about what they'll do. And I think that's what they should be campaigning on too. Hey, if you give us a large enough majority that we don't need to worry about what the Republicans want, we won't worry about what the Republicans want, because what they want is terrible. And we're going to do what we have promised to do, which is, and not always the best thing that could possibly be done, but is always better than what the Republicans would do.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's the way I've used it before. I mean, I've described it in a number of different ways, but one of the things to me, I remember hearing this from centrists in debates and conversations. And I'm like, you would never tell an abused spouse not to defend themselves against their abuser, because if they do, their abuser will hit them twice as hard. You would never, ever give that logic in that situation. But that is tantamount to what you're doing here. Listen, if Democrats do anything, Republicans will overreact in bad faith. As you say, they're going to do it anyway. And by that logic, this is what I respond with. Democrats just might as well not run for office. By simply existing in politics,
Exactly.
you are potentially triggering an overreaction from a bad faith authoritarian party. And so, I find it completely unsatisfying. To me, there's, not to get too far in the weeds on politics here, but I think you'll appreciate this. So one of the things I talk about on my channel is kind of the ultimate embodiment of this. So right now, at least until November, Democrats have control of the Senate and the White House. And the president, under the Constitution, is responsible for nominating, federal judges and Supreme Court justices. And the Senate is responsible for confirming. And President Biden has actually been wildly successful. He's now at the point where at this same time in the administrations, he has appointed more federal judges than Donald Trump. And that was Mitch McConnell's lifelong mission. So we have beaten Mitch, not nearly to the extent we need to, but we have defeated him in his one political mission, which is also something that Biden should be talking about. I out-Mitched Mitch. I am better at doing what Mitch does than Mitch himself. But of course, the president will never say that. I wish he would. But in the Senate, there has been this rule called the blue slip. And if you don't know about this, I would encourage you to read, because I feel like you could do the best video essay about this. It's basically a gentleman's agreement for the past several decades, where if President Shives wants to fill a judicial vacancy in Senator Josiah's state, Republican or Democrat, Senator Josiah can give a blue slip back to the president and say, Mr. President, not this one. Please pick a different one. And it's one that both, parties and administrations have honored for years until Donald Trump became president. When Trump became president and Republicans had control of the Senate, they revoked the blue slip rule for, it was circuit judges. And that meant that Trump could cram any Federalist Society 40-year-old whack job in any vacancy possible, and Democrats couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Now, when Democrats won the White House and the Senate, they kept that revoked rule in place. I was stunned that they actually were willing to do that they were actually not willing to restore it. They told Republicans, they said, listen, you did it to us. We are not obligated to restore it. You did it first. You're going to make in your bed and lie in it. But what Democrats should have done was revoke that blue slip rule for district judges, and they didn't. They had the power to do the same thing for the next level of judges down. And Steve, the reason that Judge Aileen Cannon, a Trump appointee, is presiding over Donald Trump's classified documents case is because she's a district judge. And there are so many vacancies in Florida that Republican senators have blocked, so that when the case was put in Florida and it was randomly assigned, the probability that it would land in front of her increased. So you can draw the chain of events that Democrats refusing to wield power the way that Republicans do has led to a chain of events which is allowing this case to rot because it wound up in front of a Trump appointee. If they had done what Republicans did, then the odds of it landing in front of this Trump appointee would have diminished rapidly. And they still haven't done it, Steve. That blue slip, as November rapidly approaches, and it is possible but unlikely that we will keep the Senate because the map is pretty difficult. Republicans need to only flip 2 seats. But they still won't do it, Steve. So there's still vacancies in Florida. And people are calling for it. Oh, Senator Dick Durbin, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, please revoke the blue slip. And what we're hearing is, well, if we do it, they'll do it to us. I'm like, they've already done it unprompted at a different level. What is to stop them from doing it again if you don't do it? Like, they seem to think of it as almost like an RPG where in order for Republicans to do something bad to us, we first must do something bad to them. That's not how it works.
No, and it's disappointing that there's any of that mindset left in the Democratic Party after the holdup of the Merrick Garland Supreme Court nomination, 8 years ago. I mean, as soon as that happened, as soon as it became clear that the Republicans in the Senate were going to hold up a Supreme Court justice nomination for purely political reasons, there was no legitimate governmental reason to not put this nomination to a vote up or down on the Senate, other than, well, it's an election year and we're hoping our guy's going to win and then he can fill this vacancy. Like, that was the only reason they did it. After they said they wouldn't do it and had it was a broadly similar situation to the blue slip situation. And they said, no, we're going to do the nakedly political thing that is in our advantage. Once they did that, the fact that there is any elected Democrat in the House or the Senate, or hell, anywhere in the country that is willing to give the Republicans that kind of benefit of the doubt is infuriating to me. I mean, and I wonder, like, what would it take? Like, what do they have to do? How bad do they have to get before some of you guys realize the nature of the fight that you're in? Like, they don't, and that's you mentioned it earlier, like that MAGA doesn't have, it's not a principled movement. And I mean, that's a point that I come back to again and again in almost every one of those "If Republicans Said the Quiet Parts Loud" video. They have no principles. All they care about is winning. That's it. and they will do whatever they have to win and to take power and to be able to do what they want. That's it. And if you're playing a game with them where you're like, well, they're just the principled opposition. No, they're not. Don't give them anything more than you absolutely have to. Take every advantage you possibly can against them because they're doing that to you. And
100%.
that's why they're winning.
Yeah,
because you're not willing to fight them. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting too because again, I'm reminded of the Merrick Garland example. What's funny is they did the nakedly political thing. Hey, it's an election year. We don't do this in an election year. And then when 2020 came around, it was also an election year.
Yeah,
they're like,
exactly.
yeah, you know that thing we said during the last election year? Screw that.
Never mind.
Yeah, we're And I agree with you. After that, as far as I'm concerned, this whole canard about the Supreme Court, it's the apolitical branch. We don't play political games. But by the way, historically inaccurate. The founding fathers did, in fact, change the composition and the size between President Adams and President Jefferson all the way up until Lincoln. The Supreme Court was a political football, but we Republicans indoctrinated the American people because, of course, they've had the majority for 50 years, so they want to establish the legitimacy of the court. Like, yeah, the court's apolitical. Leave the court alone. Well, you're only saying that because it's your majority that's controlled the court since
exactly.
1974. But after that to me, the court was fair game. It's like, okay, we should be doing this differently, but Democrats won't do it. You say that you agree that MAGA is unprincipled. I call it a cult. Do you think MAGA is a cult, or is that too far?
I mean, I think it has all the hallmarks of a cult. I think the people who like the most ardent Trump supporters certainly seem to think and definitely talk and act like they're in a cult. And I mean, and even the elected officials, the people, the senators and members of Congress and state governors, people who you would think have the political power to be able to stand up and say, oh, no, that's against our principles. We're not doing that. Even people who opposed Trump before he got the nomination in 2016, people like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham, who said, oh, if he gets nominated, it'll be the end of the party. I would never support him under any circumstances. As soon as he got nominated, and then as soon as it started to look like he might win, oh, he's definitely our guy. Donald Trump is going to be a great president. Oh, yeah. And they're still that way today. I mean, my God, just last week, some of the same people who were cowering in the Capitol building, afraid for their lives when Trump supporters stormed the Capitol on January 6, 2020 or 2021, Trump came back and they were genuflecting before him like he was the Pope. I mean, yeah, they're completely craven. They have no principles. And yes, they do behave like they are in a cult. That's how I mean, and I have a soft spot for cult documentaries. I'm clicking around on Netflix or Max and I see a new cult documentary. I'm like, put that in my list. I'm watching that, and it has all the hallmarks of that. It's the unthinking obedience to a cult leader who, when viewed from the outside, is completely unimpressive. Like, if you're not a member of the Trump cult and you look at Donald Trump, you're like, what is it with this guy? Like, how can anyone take him seriously for a second? There's not a single impressive thing about him, except maybe his brazenness, like his audacity. But other than that, like, he's not smart. He's not a good public speaker. He's not charming. There's nothing compelling or magnetic about him at all. And that's the same with every cult leader that I know of. Like every cult leader I've ever seen, it's always like a complete loss of a person, like someone who just has no charisma, nothing compelling about them at all. And yet they've somehow managed to inspire this ridiculous level of devotion in certain people. And that's what Trump has done with the Republican Party. So, yeah, I mean, if someone calls it a cult, I'm certainly not going to fight him on it.
Yeah, it's almost like Jim Jones on an exponential level. I mean, I think you can make the argument that MAGA is the biggest and most dangerous cult, if not in global history, then certainly in American history, tens of millions of people. Sure. And it's tough because, I grew up in rural Kentucky, and I have family members and friends whom I dearly love, who are or were at one point like very deep in the Trump camp. And it's certainly very challenging, but I just feel like you got to be honest. And I do think it has the hallmarks of a cult. I definitely, your point about Trump, when we segue into pop culture, I think there's a beautiful segue there that I'll identify in a moment. But One of the other videos that you did that I really, really loved, and I shared it on Twitter. I don't have nearly as big of a Twitter following as I do on YouTube, so it didn't land as well. You did a really good, I would argue, very vulnerable video advocating for President Biden's reelection, while also being very honest from your perspective about his management of the situation in Gaza. And so full disclosure, my position on this, I focus infinitely more on domestic politics and electoral politics, because foreign policy was actually the area I struggled in the most getting my political science degree. And I try to operate from a degree of epistemic humility. If I don't know what I'm talking about, I try not to put my foot in my mouth. And so I have steered clear of both it and the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, these two major international crises. And I consume, content from people who also talk about it, yourself included. And there's no question that at the very least, this has been an enormously controversial management by Biden. Some say that, he should, use the power of the executive the way that President Reagan did, the way that President Biden, actually, Mehdi Hasan wrote a really good op-ed where he actually said at the beginning of his presidency, President Biden got on the phone to Bibi over a situation in Israel and said, hey, we're at a runway. And then within an hour, Bibi stopped what he was doing.
Yeah.
And so at the bare minimum, he's gotten a lot of flack and pushback from it. I have also supported the uncommitted movement in the primary. I think it is perfectly reasonable for people to leverage their vote or threaten to leverage their vote against the president. Say, listen, Mr. President, I will vote for you. I'm willing to vote for you. I'm willing to reward you, but I need something in exchange. This is what's important to me. This is what's most important to me. I need you to move on Gaza.
Yeah.
However, I've also been of the opinion that as the decision tapers between Trump and Biden, I think it's important to be very honest that even on this issue, based on all indicators, President Biden is better objectively than Donald Trump. And this is something I feel confident in saying, despite my relative lack of knowledge of the situation compared to experts, because even people, again, like Mehdi Hasan and yourself have said the same thing. And you've both been very critical of the president's management of this. So I'd like you to talk about that video and about how you tried to thread those needles, because damn, that's a hard thing to try to do, to very bluntly and very thoroughly criticize the president and also at the very end say, but I still think you should vote for him. So can you talk about all of that?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest challenges about talking about politics from my perspective is, in my heart, I have the same idealism that a lot of people on the left have, including a lot of people that are further to the left politically than I am. Like, I hear them talk about the kind of world that they would like to have, and it sounds pretty good to me. But I balance that with a kind of ruthless pragmatism of, okay, well, how do we get there from here? And the situation in Gaza is an example of those two sides kind of clashing in a very violent way in my mind, because yes, what is happening in Gaza is abominable and is unjustifiable. And if there were a switch that Joe Biden could flip and just end it, and he's not flipping that switch, then I think that's indefensible. But I also recognize that the situation is a lot more complex than that. I do at least strongly suspect that there is more that Biden could be doing that he isn't doing, and that is disappointing and frustrating and infuriating, especially when you see, the brazenness of the Israeli military's continuing assault on Gaza, and and how obviously untrue their claims are when they say, like, oh, we're doing everything we can to protect civilian lives. And it's like, that's obviously not true. You're bombing refugee camps, you're destroying entire towns. Like, you're not being careful. But having said that, yes, it's important for those of us in the United States, no matter how important we think the Gaza situation is, whether that's the only thing you care about or you don't really care about it at all. It is, to me, objectively undeniable that as bad as it has been under Biden, it is and will continue to be better under Biden than it would be under Trump. I don't know how anybody can argue that having Donald Trump as the president of the United States for the next 4 years would make life better for the people in Gaza. I don't see that argument, because not only would Trump be even more of a rubber stamp for whatever the Netanyahu government wants to do, he's also said things like he wants to bar Palestinian refugees from coming to this country. He wants to cut off foreign aid to Palestine, to Gaza.
Expel people who are sympathetic to
people who are sympathetic, like people who are already in this country. You're sympathetic. Oh, you probably have you condemned Hamas today? If not, you're out of here. Like, it would obviously be worse under Trump, obviously. And I get the sort of queasiness that people have about supporting Biden on this issue, because I feel the same thing. Like, it's, to me, Biden's support of or his enabling of what's happening in Gaza is his equivalent of like FDR opening internment camps for Japanese Americans during World War II. It's that one indefensible blot on his administration where you can, I mean, other things you can argue and you can say, well, I don't like this or I don't like that, or he could have gone further there. But with FDR putting people in camps and with Biden enabling the Israeli assault on Gaza, it's like, no, I can't justify that. I can't defend that. I can't put that into a context where I think like, well, maybe it was okay for the time. Like, no, it's a mistake. It's going to be a black mark on his record for the rest of history. So I get why people are queasy about, and I get the emotional place people come from when they say, I can't vote for someone who supports a genocide. Okay, I get that. But one of these two guys is going to be the president. And if you really care about the people of Gaza and you want the best for them and you want what is happening to them right now to end as soon as possible, and you want their situation to improve as quickly as possible, as much as it sucks, and as much as you will probably have to sacrifice your moral purity to do so, which I know a lot of people, especially on the left, really don't like to do, it's better for Joe Biden to be the president than it is for Donald Trump. And if you are a voter in this country and you care about the people of Gaza, you should vote for Joe Biden.
Right.
You should put your, and I said, I think in the video you're referencing, I think I ended it with, it's not about you. It's not about you. You might not feel good about yourself if you vote for Biden. I get that. I understand that. But if your goal is to use whatever small political power you have to do the best thing you can for the people of Gaza, then voting for Joe Biden is what you have to do.
Yeah, you used a combination of words, which I remember at the time, and even thinking about it actually makes it gives me goosebumps, because I'd never heard it put this way before, that, I've heard people express similar sentiments, but again, I feel like you cracked the code in the combination of words. You said something to the effect of, and obviously this is your opinion, right? You're not saying this is just, this is how you look at voting, that your vote is not intended to be a purely insulated decision. It is, I think you used the phrase, your share of the collective power that we as eligible voting citizens have. And that there's a responsibility to wield that share of power carefully and thoughtfully, and not simply let it be a reflection of whatever like whim or like, intense feeling you have. Basically, do I feel good about this should not be the most important thing when it comes time to assign your vote. There should be other factors which take precedent. Will this be good for me? Will this be good for others? Will this be better for others than the alternative? That should trump, pun intended, your feelings on the matter. And I love that. And that's why I encourage people, especially if you're watching this on my channel, I'll link it in the description. You need to watch that video, because I thought it was, again, I say vulnerable because, you weren't harsh. You were sensitive and sympathetic, and you conveyed them. You didn't even just pay lip service to it. Most of the video was you going into detail about your substantive criticisms of the president's, management of this crisis from this side of the ocean, and yet you took that final step and said, as uncomfortable as this may be, and I think you even said it, that this may offend people, this may upset people, but it needs to be said. You should still vote for him anyway. My question is, what was the reaction that you... Okay, actually, two questions. Yeah. First question was this video... How did this video compare to other videos that you've done about politics? Because I have to imagine this had to be one that was like a higher order, like you paid more, like you invested more in this. This is one that you were more thoughtful of. This is one that weighed on you more. Am I wrong? Or...
No, you're right. And in terms of the reaction, it definitely got more of a negative reaction from the left than my videos typically get. I am sort of viewed by a lot of my viewers, especially a lot of my, very engaged, committed political viewers, are further to the left politically than I am. And I consider myself fairly far to the left, but I'm not an anarchist. I'm not like all the way over to the left. So a lot of people who are further to the left than I am sort of view me as like a benign sort of, like, they don't agree with me on a lot of things, or they don't agree with me on everything. And they think I probably have some counterproductive beliefs in certain areas, but they view me broadly as an ally. So generally, the political reaction I get from people further to the left than me for videos about politics is positive. But a lot of people really bridle at the suggestion that even if you think Joe Biden has enabled a genocide in Gaza, you still need to vote for him because the alternative is Donald Trump and he's even worse. Like, a lot of people really, really, really didn't like to hear that. And, either they honestly disagree with it, or they just don't like being told that. But yeah, like you said, I feel like it needs to be said. I like, as I've said over and over again, and including in that video, like, it's one of two guys, and you can feel any way you want to feel about it. You don't have to be happy about it. You can wish that we had better options. I wish we had better options, but we don't. Like, it is what it is.
What do you make of the argument, Steve? Listen, something's got to give, and if Biden's not going to budge on this in a way that I want, then I'm going to punish Biden by withholding my vote. That's something I hear a lot. By not voting for the president, I am punishing him. I have my thoughts on this, but I would like to know yours. And well, number one, have you heard that? Have you heard that expression? Yeah.
I've heard that, and I've heard the inverse of it, of why should I reward Biden with my vote if he's doing this terrible thing? You're not punishing him. Like, Joe Biden's going to be fine. If Joe Biden loses this election, I'm sure he'll be very disappointed, and I'm sure he'll be very upset. And, I believe, for all of my problems with him, I do believe sincerely that he is a person who cares about the future of this country and truly believes that his administration would be better than Trump's administration. So I'm sure he would be very upset if he lost the election, but he's going to be fine. Like, personally, Joe Biden's going to be fine. He's going to go back to Delaware and he's going to live out his years in happiness with his family. So you're not punishing him. You're punishing everybody who will be affected by Donald Trump as president, which is everybody. And again, it's just a matter of perspective. I feel like it's really important to not view it in personal terms, to not view it as, well, it's my vote and I shall use it to express it's like, yeah, okay, do that in the primaries. I agree. Vote against Biden in the primaries, vote opposition, vote non-committed if that's an option. Go to a protest. Make your voice heard. Do things outside of electoral politics to drive the conversation and to apply pressure. I think all of that is incredibly important. Do all of that. But it's going to be Biden or Trump. And if you are honestly telling me that you don't think it makes a difference, or that somehow in some like accelerationist way, well, actually Trump being president would be good because it would hasten the fall of the institutions and the revolution would come even faster. Like, I'm sorry, I just don't think that's realistic. And I don't think you should be voting on that basis, you know? So yeah, it's not about rewarding Joe Biden or rewarding the Democrats. It's about what is the optimal result of this election, of the available results. People say, well, I'm voting for Jill Stein. Well, good for you. I hope you feel good about that. It's going to accomplish, yeah, it's going to accomplish nothing. So you can sleep at night. Good for you. I hope you're not one of the people whose life is ruined in the next 4 years if Donald Trump gets to be president again. And yeah, I mean, I try to be diplomatic and as gentle as I can be in that video, because I know I'm talking to people who are on my side and who I consider friends and allies, but are not going to like what I have to say. But there is a part of me that does have kind of harsh feelings about it, that does lose patience with that point of view, that is like, look, where do you think we are? You know, like, what do you think's going on? If Biden doesn't win, Trump's going to win. Period. That's it. There's no nuance there. It's going to be option A or option B. You know, and if you tell me, well, it doesn't make a difference, I have no choice but to conclude that you're not a serious person when it comes to electoral politics.
You're either not a serious person, or I would argue you're a liar. You're either not serious or you're lying. One of the two. Like, it's either ignorance or it's malice, but it's one of the two, because you said something there about institutions and Trump, and that I do want to segue to that. Then we'll wrap up the politics part and go into pop culture. But again, you say things that are really, I think, so important to dig deep on, which is, and again, I understand some people may not like this, but again, I think Mehdi Hasan is kind of a good like North Star for a lot of progressives. And he has been able to do this as well, where he has been an outspoken advocate for Biden's record, particularly with respect to domestic policy, while also, again, very bluntly and consistently, persistently criticizing him for what he sees as a catastrophe, and what is a catastrophe in Gaza. And so these two, like you said, these two things that you have to juggle, making this video that are almost counterintuitive, right? Or at least in seeming opposition, criticizing somebody that you're also going to defend. It's counterintuitive. Yeah. But President Biden's record is just objectively better than Trump's. Like, there's no contest. Yeah. Biden, no matter what the outcome of this election is, if Biden loses, I'm convinced that in decades to come, they will look back and say that he was by far the most successful president in at least one term since President Johnson. He has been a more progressive president than Presidents Clinton and Obama. He has gotten more done legislatively with razor-thin margins. The American Rescue Plan, which, put money in the pockets of struggling Americans, it didn't go with this austerity politics approach where we actually, in order to control inflation, we just have to let unemployment skyrocket, like Larry Summers wanted. He put money in the hands of people who needed it. It created 4 million jobs. 15 million have been created on his watch. Even when you control for the pandemic, he's created more monthly jobs by far than Trump ever did. And he inherited an economy in the toilet, unlike Trump. You look at the vaccine rollout, 70% of American adults had one vaccination because Biden put a vaccination or testing site within 5 miles of 95% of the country. That saved millions of lives. As a matter of fact, the people who died the most proportionately were Trump supporters who refused to get vaccinated despite Biden begging them to get vaccinated. You signed the PACT Act, which expanded, veterans health care, Inflation Reduction Act, which is by far the biggest climate change initiative in global history. There is not a progressive government on earth anywhere that has done more to address climate change than President Biden, even though I understand he's also in other areas disappointed us by allowing, the oil and natural, fossil fuel industries to continue to produce. But that's also where presidents have to juggle competing interests, because there was a short-term problem with respect to energy. And on and on and on it goes. The Bipartisan Safer Communities Act for gun control and so on. So like, if we could just get the infrastructure law, Trump promised for years he would pass a sweeping infrastructure law. He failed. Biden codified gay marriage protections into law in the aftermath of the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, because Clarence Thomas targeted it. He says, maybe we should revisit, Obergefell, these gay marriage protections. And so Biden managed to get the votes to enshrine it into federal law. Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first really progressive Supreme Court justice the way that we, consider it, and so on and so forth. Federal judges, we could just go on and on and on. Trump's record is, anemic in comparison. And when it did things, with the exception of the First Step Act, it was bad for America. He mismanaged the pandemic. He cut a $2 trillion tax cut for the rich, et cetera, and so forth. So I'm sorry, just on the merits of what they did do, Biden's record is better. So to me, that's the other part of it too that a lot of people don't talk about is outside of the situation in Gaza, there are also other reasons to vote for Biden or to at least not vote for Trump. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something worth mentioning as well. But you mentioned institutions. And one of the things that I also talk about on my channel is that I believe a second Trump administration will be very different from Donald Trump's first administration. And the thing that I hear a lot, Steve, is you don't have to worry. Okay, listen, whatever authoritarian impulses he has, you don't have to worry about it because he was stopped the last time. He failed the last time. Do you find that argument satisfying?
No, not at all. Not at all. And I mean, even if we assume that that's true, which I don't, but even if we assume that, why give him the chance? Like, why allow, if you have anything to do in your power to stop it or to help stop it, why allow a candidate with open authoritarian ambitions to become the president of the United States? Like, what possible reason could, he probably won't be as bad as you think. That's not a reason to just stand back and wash your hands of it because you don't like the other guy. I mean, my God, say whatever you want about Joe Biden. One thing you can't honestly say about him is that he's an authoritarian. I mean, he's not someone, I'm pretty sure whether he loses in November or he wins and he serves a second term, whenever his time is up, he will leave the White House. He will turn the keys over to the next guy, right? You don't have to worry about that. That thought shouldn't even come into your head. Oh, gee, I wonder if Biden just refuses to give up power. That's never going to happen. With Trump, that's a very realistic concern, and my question would be what makes you think that he will stop like he did in the first term with the second term? I mean, what makes you think that he and his administration and the people who are pushing him to go ever more in the authoritarian fascist direction won't redouble their efforts and try even harder and fight even dirtier and do anything that they didn't try last time the next time? Like, it's such a silly argument. And it's I don't understand why people who recognize that Trump is a threat and recognize that another Trump administration would be bad and could potentially be absolutely catastrophic for this country as a democratic republic, why they are making excuses for why it would be okay for Trump to win. Like, I don't understand that the litany you just ran down of all Biden's accomplishments and compared to what Trump did in his term, like, it's not even close. Even with the Gaza situation, and even if you care about the Gaza situation, as I do, it's not a difficult choice between Biden and Trump. It's just not. I read a piece that was actually, it was a quote from a David Sedaris piece where he described it. He said, imagine you're on an airplane and the flight attendant comes by with the meal options, and they say, okay, your choices are a chicken breast or a plate of feces with broken glass. And to be undecided in this election is to say to the stewardess, well, how's the chicken cooked?
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to think about this. You think whatever you want about Joe Biden, focus on his failures and the things he hasn't done instead of the things he has done. Well, even if you do that, it's still a clear choice. One of these is clearly preferable to the other. And the fact that people who are, who are outside the Trump cult are struggling with this is incredibly aggravating to me. It's like, why do we need to convince you of this?
It is. It's incredibly, It's incredibly frustrating. It's incredibly stressful. The election is this close, and it
Yeah.
really makes me ponder all of the institutional advantages that the right has, which I'm sure you feel the same way.
Sure.
Our political system advantages them. It's affirmative action for Republicans. They have the electoral college. They have a Senate, which gives, it's basically a split Senate or damn close to it. And yet the Republicans represent 40 to 50 million fewer people. That's in the Senate. Then people say, well, Josiah, the House is where it really matters. That's where these, really populous blue states really get to swing their weight around, except not really, because of gerrymandering that Republicans do. People say, well, Democrats gerrymander. Yeah, not nearly to the same extent. If gerrymandering is going to be on the table, I'm sorry, this is where I become a ruthless pragmatist. I say that blue states should gerrymander Republicans out of existence. Draw those maps however you have to. If this is how it's going to be. Like, I live in North Carolina, which is a purple state. Republicans have the majority now, and they've totally screwed us. Right now, we have a 7-7 split in terms of our congressional delegation. They redrew the maps, and they're probably going to have a 10 to 11 to 3 to 4 split. And even though it's a purple state, for every registered Democrat, you'll find a registered Republican and vice versa. Because again, as you said, going all the way back, this is their killer instinct. But it goes more than that. They control the majority of state legislatures. They have a 6-3 conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court. They have the Sinclair network. So I think it's like 70% of local media is controlled by the Sinclair group, which is a right-wing group. You have the Fox propaganda network. You have on alternate media. You have the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Tim Pool, all these people. They have every damn advantage. Plus, again, the asymmetry of expectations. They get to exacerbate all that, be as ruthless and as mean as possible, and Democrats have to be feckless and mild. And I feel all this. And then you add on top of this, Steve, this indecision among our coalition about what to do about it. And it's like, how about we just win? How about we win? Exactly. And then we take a breather and sort all this stuff out. Then if you want to fight amongst yourselves after we win, so be it. But I just don't think that we can afford this sort of indecision and schismatic infighting at this particular time, because on top of all of that, what's really different about the GOP now, and really even different about Trump in 2020 and 2016, is he's more unhinged than ever. You talk about why on earth would we just allow this person to take the chance? That's my claim. Like, when people say, well, the guardrail stopped him before, I'm like, let's follow that metaphor. Would you ever, if you're in a truck riding, in a passenger seat, and somebody, caroons into the guardrails and it holds, would you ever get back in the truck with them if they were like, hey, let's try it again? It held the first time. Let me drive. No, you would take the damn keys and get out of the car, and then you'd reinforce the guardrail. Why on earth would we do this? Trump has promised that he will not have the people in place who stopped him before, that he will appoint sycophants, and that he's going to take a more aggressive approach. He says he understands the levers of power more. He'll put people in place who will do his bidding. And I'm sorry, these institutions are not divine. They're comprised of people. And if you have the right people in place who will do your bidding instead of what is constitutionally mandated, that's game over. It's just game over. So the last thing I'll say on politics is I guess I'll end on a note of optimism, again, bringing it full circle to your approach to politics, which is, have you had chance to pay any attention to the Democrats in the House of Representatives, people like Jamie Raskin and AOC and Jasmine Crockett and Maxwell Frost, a freshman class of Democrats who have joined in 2023? Have you been able to follow any of their activities?
Yes, they give me hope. Jamie Raskin actually represents a district not far from my district. He's closer to DC, but so I'm particularly familiar with him. But and also Eric Swalwell, who is not quite a rookie. He's been there a little while, but he's of that same, sort of ilk. And I've said many times, I wish that every Democrat in the House was like that. I wish that they would all fight tooth and nail like that. And I'm also a big fan of Ed Markey in the Senate. I said, God, think of what we could accomplish if the Senate had 60 Ed Markeys. Think of how different this country would be. It's not, I'm a registered Democrat. I vote Democrat. I think it's important to participate in the system, as flawed as it is, because if Otherwise, it's never going to change and it's never going to get any better. And yeah, there are Democrats who inspire me and give me hope and make me think, well, hopefully this brand of being a Democrat catches on, or eventually we just hang on long enough that this group of people becomes the dominant generation in the party, and they don't lose all of their progressive idealism and motivation, and hopefully things turn in a more positive direction. um yeah, absolutely. There every time I see a Democrat respond with some pugnacity, I'm like, yes, more of this, please. Like, this is what we need.
Agreed.
Yeah.
That's where, again, full disclosure, I'm a cynic. And so I am nervous about this election. I didn't think the midterms would turn out the way that they did ever since Donald Trump won. Because I remember so vividly going to bed election night 2016, even though Secretary Clinton was down in the polls, I'm like, there's no way we're going to elect Donald Trump. So I literally went to bed early and then woke up to the shock of my life. So after that, I got out of the prophecy business and I just assumed the worst. And Democrats have consistently, in the Trump era, overperformed. They've thrashed Trump in 2018, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. It's possible we'll defeat him again. I don't know. But again, I'm a cynic. But these Democrats in the House in particular, a couple in the Senate, Ed Markey is a great example. Sheldon Whitehouse is another example as well. But particularly these House Democrats really inspire me. Jamie Raskin, like Swalwell, is not a rookie. They've been there for a while.
Yeah.
But I've actually seen these freshman Democrats like Jasmine Crockett, Jared Moskowitz, Maxwell Frost, Dan Goldman. They've really increased the heat, and I actually think they've inspired the Raskins, the Swalwells, even the AOCs, who came in as a firebrand, by the way. And I'm thinking, damn, this is it. Because we probably will. I think we're more favored to win the House than we are the presidency, than we are the Senate. So I think it's likely that we will have a Democratic majority after the election in the House. And I'm hyped, man. I'm hyped to see what they can do when they have the gavels, when they have subpoena power, when they have investigations. AOC's progression to me has been one to really watch, because she was so underestimated when she was elected that she's just, she doesn't know what she's doing. People say she's an idiot. And yet she has proved her haters wrong. If you see these billionaire CEOs that she interviews during congressional hearings, you feel it. You feel like their sphincters clench in fear.
Absolutely.
Because she's so she's actually the vice ranking member under Raskin of the House Oversight Committee, the most powerful and important of the committees. That's how much faith the Democrats have in her. And Raskin's brought the heat too. Like he's always been that professorial constitutional scholar, and he's still that. But he is just like, he's constantly making fun of Marjorie Taylor Greene. She constantly complains about it. She goes, you have Jamie Raskin in there making fun of me. And it's like, good. You deserve to be made fun of.
Exactly.
In fact.
Everybody should do that to you every time they see you.
Yes. And so I love that to me, it's like that even Jamie Raskin is like, yeah, I'm still going to be the professor, but I'm going to be the hip, cool. I don't know. I'm just really excited to see what this could be if they win. And it's important, though, that we keep the others as well, because if you have these Democrats in power in the House, it's certainly better than Republicans, but their power, their potential will be limited if there's a Republican president and or a Republican Senate. So I feel, to anyone watching on my channel, or if Steve decides to upload this on his, it is important to go out and vote, because it's not enough. It's like one of those things, we have to win all of it. We can't afford to lose anything at this point, because of what this party has become, the GOP. Is there anything else you want to say about politics before we transition to the pop culture side? Because I do have some things I want to ask you about there.
Not really. I feel like we've covered it pretty well. Just please vote. Anybody watching, please vote, and vote for the most progressive candidates in every election up and down the ballot. Because I agree with what you just said. It's so important that we win everything we possibly can. Not just the White House, although that's incredibly important. Not just the Senate and the House, although those are incredibly important. State legislatures, governorships, anything that is on the ballot. Do your homework, find the most progressive candidate on the ballot, and vote for that person in November. It's incredibly important.